So it's time for my What Am I Sowing and Growing video now for March. And as always, I'm going to just open up the database view for February and just kind of flick through and give you a few highlights from that. So let me just record my screen. And yeah, there we go. Right, so peppers, they've come up really nicely. This year I've just chitted my peppers. So just damp kitchen roll and just lay the seeds out on that and in a sealed container. And about, I don't know, 7 to 10 days later, you see the little roots starting to come out. And at that point, just drop them into the compost and cover them over. And that has been so much more reliable than starting them in a propagator. And of course, I haven't needed a propagator. When you chit them like that, you don't need any additional heat. Just pop them on a windowsill where it's nice and warm and not too sunny. So that's worked really well. My first sowing of Zebrun onions and Red Baron onions, basically my germination test, they all germinated. So that was really nice. Honestly, I do get slightly nervous about whether my onions are going to germinate because I've had so many bad experiences in the past. And, if you sort of try it out in the middle of February when I do my main crop onions and then they don't germinate, it can be really frustrating because by that time you've got to get new seeds, get them back in again, and then you're running a little bit too late. So it's really nice to do that germination test. So I started some early brassicas, some early calabrese, some red fugo, red cabbages, and some graffiti cauliflowers. And they are all in the polytunnel now. And I've also started an early batch of colettes. Now, I've never tried colettes, started in February. I normally start mine in the middle of March, and you'll see that in the video in a minute. But yeah, I just thought I'd try it because they are one of my favourite crops. And if I could get them slightly earlier in the year, well, that would be lovely. So yeah, I'm going to try that. Giant red celery is it's just germinating basically, and the spindly little plants look so weak and feeble, but anyway, they're coming up. And I've got so much lovely celery behind me actually, and I'm really pleased with this early batch of celery because the overwintered celery basically died in that big freeze. So yeah, it's really nice to have those plants looking so healthy, and I've got a few successions of those. Basically, I'm doing progressive pricking out, so they're at slightly different stages, and yeah, looking forward to getting some of those planted out. I've had a lot of problems germinating lettuce, and the particular varieties that I've struggled with are Canasta and Red Grenoble, or Grenoble Red, or Red Grenoblese, or whatever, however you like to say it. I contacted Pablo from Seeds of Italy, and they're the importer for Franchi Seeds, and it's Franchi Seeds that actually are the source of the Red Grenoble and the Canasta seeds. And he said that in particular, the Grenoble Red is a nightmare for them. They're really difficult because it's one of these heirloom seeds, heirloom lettuces, very unreliable from year to year as to the sort of germination rate that you can expect after storing them for, say, a year or whatever. And so, a lot of people reporting, a batch that's sort of maybe 2 years old, and that's my experience, still within its use by date, but just not germinating at all. Whereas their more modern varieties are much more sort of shelf stable, the seeds. Anyway, sent me new seeds, and a kind viewer also sent me some of their home saved seeds, which they said they got 100% germination from. So I'm now kind of flush with the Red Grenoble seeds, or Grenoble Red seeds. So I'm really happy about that because it is one of my favourite lettuces for winter. And he also sent me some new Canasta ones. I've not tried those yet, but basically I've just tried, I've gone through so many different packets of Canasta, and it used to be germinating really reliably, and then it just stopped completely. Even seeds from different suppliers, who knows. Anyway, so I've got some brand new ones which I haven't yet tried out. I'll see. The Swift potatoes have been a bit disappointing. So I sowed those, when was it, back on the 6th of February, and they're still not broken surface. They're in pots here. you can see one just behind me here in the polytunnel, and normally they're up within 10 days, but they're still dormant. And that's really frustrating because I normally, for my early potatoes, I normally home save Charlotte potatoes from last year. And so they're all primed and ready to go at this time of year. But obviously these have been kept in such optimum conditions that they've not broken dormancy yet, and they're just sitting there. It's really just what a waste of space. But anyway, I've just started chitting my early potatoes now. I don't bother chitting the later ones until I start to see some sign of the sprouts starting to form, because I just find they just dry out so much if you start chitting them too early. You know, I'm not going to start planting them until April. You know, I don't need to start chitting them until, you know, well into March really. Field bean tips that we planted in the ground to replace the one with the mouset, well, unfortunately, you know, they're not up yet either. But I put a lot of shallots in. They're starting to show some signs of life now. I've got some red sun and I've got some golden gourmet. And then my main crop of red baron and Zabun onions, they are all up as well. And so it's so nice, you know, like all my onions now have germinated. And I've just got those on a windowsill because we have had a few frosty nights. So I'm not taking any risks. I don't like my onions to have too many frosts. I don't mind the odd frost, but they're bound to have some frosts in sort of April and May anyway, because we have frosts all the way through until probably, well, certainly to the middle of May. Generally after the middle of May we're okay, but obviously I'm putting my onions out generally around sort of the 10th of April, something like that. So they'll have the odd frost on them then. So if I can avoid multiple frosts by just keeping them on the windowsill for a little while, then that reduces the chance they'll go to seed. Joy Choy, red pak choi and tatsoi, so they're all up, nice little plants, but I've got loads of other Asian greens already, earlier successions in the ground. So we've had now continuous Asian greens since September, I think. It's been really nice. So I've done a bit better job of my Asian greens this year, and I did a video about that a few days ago. So I've got loads of spinach in the ground. Right now I've got a little bit of a glut of spinach, but obviously it'll start to go to seed in sort of March, early April time. So I need to start sowing new successions. I tried a germination test on Mikado, which is my favourite sort of spinach for late May, early June sort of time frame. And nothing happened. Basically, I put in about 30 or 40 seeds, and I got about, I don't know, 3, something like that. So I bought a new packet of those, and my cucumbers are up. They're up on the shelf up there behind me, and they're the ones that are going to go in this conservatory. There's no point doing cucumbers early. They're going to need it really warm, like above 10 degrees centigrade. And unless you've got a tiny little greenhouse that you can afford to heat, then it's just much better to do it in a conservatory or not at all. My next succession of broad beans, they've just germinated, and I haven't done another succession of Swift because there's no point, because they're not exited dormancy yet. So they're just sort of waiting, chitting until I see some sign of life. And my next succession of beetroot are up, growing well, will be ready to plant out next week, and they're the ones that are going at the back of the pepper beds. So what I did last year, and it was a tremendous success, so I'm redoing it, is just harvesting the back row of spinach or lettuce or whatever it is, and in those back rows, so right at the back, which is the north side, so it gets loads of sun, I'm putting beetroot, so I don't need that very many. Probably, I think I'm putting in a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 18, 36 clumps of 3, which should be enough to get us all the way through summer, which is great because then it means I don't have dedicated beetroot beds. I just let them grow really big because they're still it doesn't matter what, you know, beetroots that grow fast in spring and summer, you know, it doesn't matter how big they are, they won't go woody. It's only if you can leave them for another 6 months or something like that that there's any risk of them going woody. So yeah, big is great, and yeah, that means they don't dry out as much, and they've got a nice deep root all the way through summer, so they just do fantastic there at the back, and they don't really seem to mind. They interact, they don't interfere with the peppers, and the peppers don't interfere with them, and of course they're taking advantage of all that heat. Now I know some people say beetroot are cool weather crop. Well, they're not really. You plant them in spring, but they really love the heat of summer. So in a low tunnel, they just love it, and they just romp away. So yeah, loads of radish sown, planted, and just going to keep on doing that. I won't really mention radish anymore in this video because you just keep doing them every 2 weeks in modules, and just planting them out, interplanting them wherever you find a gap. Lettuces, loads of lettuce coming on really nicely. I'm actually slightly short of lettuce right now, just because we get through so much. So I only managed to pick, I think, 12 litres or something like that of lettuce this week. But it's kind of one of those things where I'm kind of, you don't have very much, and then I just have masses of it, you know. So it's always tricky to get the timing right, so I don't get too much and don't run out. Yeah, so lots of lovely varieties, quite a lot of them planted. Flashy butteroak, beautiful. Amaze, really lovely. Novara, my favourite for everything but the middle of winter. Canasta failed. Grenoble Red failed, but got some Grenoble Red seedlings starting to come up now. Lobjoit's Green, great, really vigorous growth from that. Garsman's salad onions and all these other things still to plant. I'm doing them today. So red tatsoi, which I'm really looking forward to because I love tatsoi as a salad ingredient. So doing some red ones is really exciting. Next succession of spinach. This will be the last, I think, of the true spinach. So going to switch over to Mikado. Sugar snap peas, second succession. The ones in the low tunnel growing really nice. They're about this sort of tall now. Really well rooted and happy. Another batch of Swift that I'm meant to be sowing, but unfortunately, as I said, I can't sow them. So miles behind on the potatoes. So it's a really good job that we're not eating any potatoes at the moment because it's Lent and Debbie's given up potatoes, and we are not eating as many potatoes in general. So the fact that it doesn't matter. Yeah, and a final batch of lettuce that I'm doing this afternoon, and I'm also doing some komatsuma, which was recommended to me by somebody in New Zealand who said it's amazing as a sort of baby leaf in salads, and you know how much I love my salads. So I'm really looking forward to getting those done. I've got lots of these beautiful Salanova lettuces as well. We're doing a lot more full head harvesting of lettuce this year rather than just taking off the outer leaves, because the quality of a hot lettuce heart is so much better, I think, than the outer leaves. So much crunchier and just beautiful. So so lots of Salanovas, so lots of lettuces, but sown in small quantities for whole head harvests. So I think, gosh, that took a long time, 13 minutes just to review February. Let me open up March. Right, so I'll go through this fairly quickly because all the details are all in the description below. You can just open this database up that I'm looking at on my iPad and you can look at it just the same as I can look at it. So I've now removed from these little cards that you see here the time under lights, because basically nothing needs to be under lights at this time, and a few other bits and pieces that aren't really relevant at this time of year, like the germination temperatures and things like that, because in a house, just germinate in the house and it's just fine for everything basically. So yeah, Mikado spinach, already mentioned that. Leeks, so I've got my early leeks, which I always put in the polytunnel just in between the peppers and the tomatoes and things, they're doing really nicely. They're about 8 inches tall, growing on well. These are the leeks that I'm going to interplant sort of around the edges and things of the brassica beds and that sort of thing. They're just like a bonus harvest for me. I won't do my main crop leeks until a little bit later. So I'm still sowing carrots into containers. I find it's too early in March to sow them into the ground. And that, for me, is a bit to do with the ground is such a high value environment for me that I don't really like to put carrots into it unless they're going to do really, really well. And so if I put them in now, the germination's a bit patchy, they don't grow very big and all of that. So it's just, I find, just a little bit better to keep doing them in containers for a few more weeks. And then in April, I'll start doing them in the ground. And then from that point onwards, I'll do them in the ground. So yeah, that's my kind of logic on carrots. Do a few celeriac, not a very important crop for us. And I'm going to start my early tomatoes, and I'm doing Tumbler and Red Profusion. Now, Red Profusion apparently is a slightly earlier version of Tumbler, so I'm doing 50-50. I want to see which ones actually come out on top, and I'm doing some in hanging baskets, and I'm doing some in containers, and I'm going to kind of just split them. These are the only tomatoes that I would consider doing this early in the year. I do ones in containers and hanging baskets. I don't want any of my cordon tomatoes done this early in the year. I'll wait a few weeks for those. Hopefully by the 3rd of March, I will actually have some swift that have broken dormancy and actually start planting some. So I'm also going to do my early parsnips. Now, I am not one of these people who thinks that a parsnip has to have had a frost in order for it to be edible. I think they're just perfectly acceptable, harvested in sort of late August and September and October. They're just fine. I don't know what people make a fuss about. That people say they're sweeter. Well, they are maybe just a slight bit sweeter, but they're really sweet anyway, parsnips. So anyway, that's just my preference. Just start them anytime, basically. This early batch, though, I chit because I find that trying to get them to germinate in the ground's quite hard in March. So I chit them, and then I just put 2 or 3 chitted seeds in each hole, and then thin them out a few weeks later. And I am putting mine interplanted into my spinach beds because basically I've got no space for them. And the spinach beds are under coal frames, so it gives them a little bit extra warmth. And then progressively, as I kind of harvest the spinach, I plant more parsnips. And then once all the spinach is out, then I plant onions. And I think I want to put Zebrun onions in at that time. More successions of lettuce. The only thing that really merits comment about this lettuce is that this is the stuff that's going to go outside unprotected other than with a bit of fleece. So that's the first outside sowing. Well, it's not an outside sowing. It's sown inside, but intended to be planted outside 21 days later. Then more successions of parsnips. So that's the next week, the bed adjoining. Again, it's just about clearing the spinach progressively and then just filling up the beds. Somebody commented actually, do some more videos about how you always can kind of harvest one thing and then the day after you harvest it, or on the same day, replant it. Well, I've got loads of videos about this. But just if you want to find out more about it, then the best place to go is in my ebook and look in the Advanced Growing Techniques, I think, section. And that section has got all about interplanting and relay planting and all of that sort of thing. Look in the basics section of the book, and there's a chapter in there all about planning. And so that's how I plan in advance, how to do all of that. And then if you look in each individual growing guide for each crop, you'll find a section on what to precede the crop with, what to follow the crop with, and what to interplant into the crop or relay plant into the crop. So there's loads of stuff basically on all of that, and basically any planting video that I do, I'm always kind of into planting, and I'll talk about that. And then finally, in all the tour videos I do, I try to talk about what the preceding crop was and what the following crop is, and what I'm interplanting or relay planting in. And so the difference also between interplanting and relay planting is an interplant tends to stay with the primary plant for a long period of time, whereas in a relay plant is where you've got an existing planting and you plant something into that bed, and then the primary planting kind of is removed a couple of weeks later. So it's just getting a sort of short period, like a 2 to 3 week kind of start, and then you remove the old plant and leave the new plant to progress. Right, anyway, how did I get onto all that? So the next thing is, more carrots. Just doing carrots like all the time, because obviously we eat carrots all the time. And then my main crop leeks. So I'm doing my main crop leeks middle of March, and I'll be planting those out sometime in May, I should think. So now comes a really important time, the middle of March. Middle of March, I think, I know some people do this earlier, but I just think middle of March is the best time for me in my environment and my type of soil and all of that. So all those caveats, to do your main crop brassicas. So your Brussels sprouts, your red cabbages, your cauliflowers, in my case graffiti cauliflowers, your early kales, so the ones that are going to get planted out. Obviously I've always got like a super early crop that's undercover, but for most people who are doing just outside planting of kale, now's the time to do it. Don't do too many, because kale is incredibly prolific, and a lot of people don't eat a lot of kale in summer, so I tend to just do like 2 or 3 of each variety of kales, and then I'll do a late crop, because otherwise you're just tying your beds up all the way through summer when you could get another crop out of them. So yeah, just a few kales, but lots of different varieties. So I've got Dazzling Blue and Nero Black Magic and Pentland Brig and Reflex and Sympathetic and probably Scarlet as well. So all these different red kales and purpley kales and things like that. We do like our kales. And then the main crop colettes, as I've already mentioned, the main crop Brussels, and I'll actually be planting out my Taunton Dean cuttings and all that. So now is also middle of March is the earliest possible time, I think, to start courgettes. And I'm only going to do 4 seeds, assuming I'm going to plant out 2 plants. They're going to go in the polytunnel. They're going to need to be wrapped up with bubble wrap. What I find with courgettes is that they don't need to be quite as warm as a lot of other squashes in order to get a good harvest. So long as you can keep them above freezing, they're going to be okay. And obviously, something that's going to be sown in the middle of March is going to be planted out in the middle of April. We're going to have a few frosts after that, even in the polytunnel. So they do need to be kept quite warm. So I use like a little bubble wrap tent around mine. But it's worth it, because I do get about a month's worth of early courgettes. And, by that time, and I'm talking about harvesting sort of mid-May sort of time, we've run out of our winter squashes. So yeah, it's just nice to have a continuous supply of squash. Obviously, if you're prepared to go to the shops, I wouldn't even bother with it. But if you don't want to go to the shops and you want to be self-sufficient, then it's a nice technique to use. And yeah, just radishes and lettuces. And you see lots of these Salanovas that I've got from Just Seed. They're, I think, the only source of them in the UK, and they look really beautiful. So we're doing quite a lot of these in the kitchen garden, because we don't really do very many flowers in the kitchen garden, and these lettuces, I think, they look like flowers. They look better than flowers. They last longer than flowers. So yeah, lots of them, and you can harvest them full heads and they're really efficient. So yeah, see lots and lots of Selanovas in my future. And then some more parsnips. And the reason I've got all these staggered sort of sowings of parsnips is because I don't have any space to plant them all at the same time. And so I've got my sort of super early ones, as I say, that I'm going to harvest in August and September. And then I've got the ones that are going to stay with us, all the way through winter, and we've still got some now. So, we'll still be harvesting parsnips kind of till the end of March, I'm guessing. And yeah, so that's why you'll see multiple successions in my guides. So the next things are the kind of early big potatoes. So not the new potatoes, which are the Swifts, but the ones that are going to get used as general purpose potatoes, but more specifically for baking potatoes, because Debbie and the kids, they do love a potato, baking potato. I don't like potatoes, so I only grow them. And I'm doing Estima and Charlotte. So I think Charlotte is the best general purpose potato. I've tried Nicola, tried it last year, didn't do anywhere near as well as the Charlotte. So we're just sticking with Charlottes now. Not trying out any new suggestions. And Estima, though, was fantastic for the baking potatoes. It was a firm favourite, better than Charlotte for that, better than Cara, better than Sa Palmyra, whatever, it's better, just better than everything. So we're doing Estima. And these are the two early ones that we're doing, and some of them are going in the mini greenhouse and some of them are going in the polytunnel. I've actually got a lot more space for potatoes in the polytunnel this year because I'm not doing any containers in the polytunnel over summer, so definitely not by July. So these are ones to be harvested in June. In July in the polytunnel, it's just too warm for containers, so I'm just not bothering. Now, although I've done loads and loads of onions from seed, I do like to do some onions from sets, just as a kind of contingency in case my onions from seed go to seed. And so I'm doing, I think, 150, something like that. So about a quarter of my onions are from sets. And yeah, just purely, not because they're a better variety or anything like that, just purely for their kind of risk mitigation. And we definitely appreciated it last year because all the seeded onions, it all went to seed. So last batch, I think, of the Mikado, maybe not the last batch, but certainly getting to the end of the Mikado, because that's going to be harvested in June. Much after that, just like all of the spinaches, there's no point growing it. Better off doing something alternative like chard or New Zealand spinach. And then I've got my tomatoes. Now, we're not doing actually, itchy face, we're not doing as many tomatoes as we have in previous years because we just find we have so many tomatoes, we just can't get through them all. So I'm not doing as many in the polytunnel, and I'm doing quite a lot as container ones on the patio because they're so prolific, these little tumbler type cherry tomatoes. So all the ones that say grafted on them, so I've got grafted tumbler and I've got grafted crimson plum and I've got grafted aviditas, I'm buying all those because I've tried grafting myself and I'm just rubbish at it, so I'm just not going to bother. I'm just buying them, it's easier. But just in case, because I had bad experiences occasionally with the grafted ones that I've got where they've just been absolutely rubbish, but then I've had some great experiences as well, which is why I continue to do it. But anyway, just in case, I'm going to sow some honeycomb and some San Marzano. So if the grafted ones, for whatever reason, failed, I'll just have like 12 or something in reserve that I've grown myself. And if I don't use them, I'll give them away. Salad onions, we're always doing salad onions. Of course, we eat thousands of salad onions. And I think this is my last sowing of graffiti cauliflower. I don't really like to do too many to grow, in the real sort of heat of summer. So that's probably too late. bit of parsley, some what's that, my third succession of peas or something like that. So that is it for March. So as I said, if you want the details of this, look down below and you'll find all the details. And of course, look in the book if you want any advice about anything, basically, because there's just loads of stuff in there. So take a look if you're interested. My name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.